Hello, welcome to the first in a series of videos where we're going to cover some modeling conversions that you can do to incorporate some variety into your Black Seas fleet. Now, before I get into the specifics, I want to talk a little bit about ship terminology back in the day. It is a lot more, I would guess, disciplined now than it used to be. Back in the 17th, 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, in fact 19th centuries even, ship classification wasn't as much a classification as it was an adjective, really, a description of the ship. And sometimes the ship will be described in terms of its size or its sail configuration or its general look. There was very little consistency. So you can actually find two or three different ships that look exactly the same, have the same components of, the same relative size, two-masted, for example, and have the same rigging approach on three different ships, and each of them will be called a different thing by their builder or their owner or the captain. And the biggest confusion comes in the cases of brigs and sloops, and it just adds confusion when you try and do research. So with that in mind, I'm going to try to kind of untwine some of the confusion that seems to be in Warlord's unrated fleet list. And today we're going to talk about the Brigantine. Now, what's interesting is there is no Brigantine listed in the unrated ship list, but if you look on page 16, take a look at the ship descriptions, they're very clear on what a barque is, what a brig is, and what a Brigantine is. And it's very interesting. You'll see very similar differences, you'll see many similarities between the brig and the Brigantine, but you'll see similarities between the barque and the Brigantine as well. And it's all about the sail arrangement, and that's what we're getting down to here. This is sail configuration. So what I like to think of is when I look at that Brigantine entry, the barque entry in the unrated list, I like to think of it as a Brigantine, because a barque is typically a three-masted ship with the rear mast, mizzenmast being for a fore and aft rig. So instead of having square sails, the sails are fore and aft. Now that's an important distinction because that's what makes the Brigantine special. And today we're going to cover some ways you can add this one special ship that Warlord currently does not have in their line to your fleet. And I'm doing this because I'm working on a pirate/privateer game, and I want to have the Brigantine represented. So we're going to use the Barque line, and we're going to show you today how to go about making that. So let's take a look first at what the brig looks like and talk about the differences with a barque. Okay, so here's the typical brig model. This one's made up to look like a pirate. You'll notice both the main and the foremast have square rigged sails, and the rear the main mast also has the bottom a gaff sail in the rear. Now, that's a brig, that's what we're used to. But let's take a look at a schooner really quick. And the difference here is the fore and aft sail. And that's what's key about a Brigantine. This sail configuration here, like on the schooner, is what you're going to find on the main mast. Now, the main mast will have either a fore and aft rig mainsail and a top sail, a square rig top sail, or it may be only the fore and aft sail. There's the two different versions of that. So when you think in terms of the term Brigantine, is typically referring to a ship that is square rigged on the main foremast and rigged fore and aft with a topsail on the main mast, okay, in the back. Now, when it has no topsail in the back on the main mast, it's going to be referred to either as a schooner brig or hermaphrodite brig. We're not going to worry about those terminologies for our purposes. A Brigantine is a Brigantine. And so we're going to treat the Barque line in the unrated fleet as a representation of the Brigantine, since the Brigantines usually fell between brig and sloop, or brig and schooner, as far as size goes. So that's why the lower hull rating of the Barque entry kind of reflects the Brigantine pretty well. All right, so today what we're going to do is, instead of having to buy a kit like the schooner here to come up with your main mast on your brig, which is entirely legitimate, let's go ahead. We're going to do a conversion today. I'm going to show you two different conversions and two different methods of each to show you how you can put either of these two types of masts, fore and aft sail masts, onto the brig's mainmast. Okay, so we're going to start with just a standard brig kit, nothing else. And what we're going to do here is we're going to use, since this has two different brigs on it, we can actually do both designs of rear mast. So this is your foremast on the brig, and this is your main mast on the brig sprue. So we're going to take these and we're going to convert these into a fore-aft rig mast. Now, this is actually not the best, in my opinion, the best way, but it's definitely nice, quick, easy. It gets you for a good-looking brig on the table. The second way to do it is to scratch build your own mast, which I can't believe I haven't shown you how to do that yet. But I'll later in the video go ahead and I'll show you that. This is a simple operation. So let's go ahead and I'm going to cut these pieces out, and I'll show you how you really just go ahead and convert it up to a fore-aft rig mast. Okay, before we actually get into how to build the main mast, I think it's best to show an example of what we're trying to accomplish here. Now, the best way to do that is take a look at the schooner. The schooner actually has, on the same ship, both examples of the kind of main mast we might want for our Brigantine. Okay, so you'll notice now in this particular case, we've got on the foremast of the schooner, we have it arranged with a topsail. Okay, and obviously in the back, the main mast of the schooner, it doesn't. Now, one thing this is missing is the sail that takes up this spot here. So that's what we're trying to accomplish, though, is these two buildings, construction. So the lower gaff is going to be set on the little pad that's below there at the bottom of the mast in either case. And you're going to want to sit it on top and angle it up just slightly. You want to fit the mast into the hull of the boat, the brig, so that you can make sure the back of the gaff boom, the bottom, rides above the gunnel of the stern, okay, the stern plate. All right, once you've got that mounted, then somewhere up here, you're going to place it so that there's an angle, it's a 45-degree angle or so. It's going to be close to the fighting top that you left on the mast. You'll see here, it's right below the yard arm of the one that still has the topsail installed. And here, it's roughly in the same position proportionately to where this one was. All right, you're going to leave plenty of room here, in this particular case, for another sail component. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at actually building the mast. All right, the video audio had a problem, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of voice over this one. You're going to be taking the existing mast, and you're going to be taking off the fighting platforms and the yard arms. Now again, this on the mast that has a topsail, you only took off the bottom main yard arm, like I'm doing here. On the mast that has no topsail, you're going to take off all of the yard arms, and then, as I'm doing here, you're going to trim around the edge of the mast, the circumference of the mast, to carve all of the platforms off. This is the easiest way to do it. You're going to have to file it after this, but at least this way you're going to get rid of the fighting platform. And then you're going to want to take that pad off that mounts normally the upper gaff boom, remove that completely. Again, use this X-Acto knife, but I'd start with a clipper. Once you have them off, then it's just a matter of cleaning it up. You can rough clean it with the edge of the side cutter, but once you get so far, you're going to have to use the actual knife and start, kind of shaving it. You can see here it doesn't look too bad. It looks like the masts are kind of joined as one piece, though there is that little bulge in the middle where the two are supposed to be married up. You're going to want to smooth that. Now you will lose the detail of the bands around that are on the lower mast. Those will not be on the upper half of the mast, but you can always paint over those, or to make it look like those iron bands are still there. Now just review the whole mast and remove all the pieces that you do not want. So here again, now that you've got everything rough cut off the mast, now very carefully use the knife. I find the best way is, instead of like whittling, you slide the knife point first up the, across the mast. That way you're sort of cutting each, or slicing the detail pieces off. That keeps it a little bit more controlled. You're less likely to slip and break a yardarm as your hand goes off in a wild slip. Once you've got that done, then you can I like to take a small rounded flat file like this and just run it over a few times until you get it nice and smooth as you want to get it. Now, I like the round version of the flat file because I have less of a likelihood that I'm going to end up with a flat spot. When I tend to use flat files, I've not really gotten a good hang on it, and I will oftentimes end up with a flat spot on a round surface. So I tend to go with my little rounded file here. You see, as you start to file that, all those little pieces disappear, and you start to develop the illusion that it's one solid piece of mast. Now you can do the same exact thing with the other yardarm and the other fighting platform, except you don't want to touch that fighting platform. You want to leave that in place, even if you take the yardarms off. So you're going to go through this one more time. Okay, I thought I'd actually interrupt here and go right here. I did forget to mention you're going to take the top yardarm off too, but here I'm at the point where I'm cleaning up the whole mast, and right here I've got this really small piece of the yardarm still attached right below that fighting top, and I don't want to mess that fighting top up. So what I would like to do is hold the blade very firmly in my hand, and then holding the mast itself, push on the, put the back of the knife blade against your thumb, bring your finger right behind, pushing the blade into that until it just ever so slightly just starts to carve that up, that you have a lot more control, and this way you don't damage that fighting top. And then you just scrape out anything that's in the way, and boom, there you go. So, and again, it's just a matter of sanding or filing all the little rough edges that you've got left. Okay, alright, so there it is, just a single mast, no spars at all, no yardarms. And there are your two masts. This is for a standard Brigantine rig, and this is for the schooner brig, or hermaphrodite brig. Okay, alright, so we'll set these aside, and now let's clean up our mess. And now here's the thing. We have to put the gaff, or what would be the booms, on the upper and lower booms for both of these. So let's do that next. Okay, so you're going to use these standard booms that are right off the brig. There's no need to make any changes for either of them. The longer of the two will be the bottom one, the smaller will be the upper. So we'll go ahead and cut those off, and we'll mount them. For this, you can use either your regular Testor's model cement, or you can use super glue. Either one works. I'm not certain which I prefer in this case. I'm very much a fan of Testor's, but use whichever one you are most comfortable with. So we're going to start with the normal Brigantine rig, and we're going to mount this smaller of the two booms on that just below this yardarm. So I'm going to start with, I'm going to start with the Testor's, because this kind of welds very well. So I'll just brush it there, and then hold this in place right here. And you want to make sure it's got a good 45-degree angle to it. And it doesn't have to be centered, like going straight back. It's nice to actually have it off at an angle slightly. And that goes for top and bottom. Matter of fact, I'll go ahead and mount the bottom one now that we're here. Now, the reason I like this is how quickly it sets, because you're welding the styrene. The one thing that's not good about this particular one is it's not doing any type of filling. And you need to do some filling here, because right here where you've got, there's a gap between the yard, or the boom itself, and the mast itself. That means there's very few points where it's actually contact with the mast, so you're going to want to fill that, and that's what I'm going to use the super glue for. But for now, I'm just going to line these up so that they're both kind of offset to an angle, because it just has a good look, in my opinion, on the table. So that's the first one. We'll leave that here as an illustration. Now we're going to do the same thing with this. Now be careful, because some of these have a break. There's a weak section. I've seen this before on a couple models, so this is one of the reasons also I like to use the tester's glue, because this helps weld it shut whenever there's a weakness, a break there. So we can do that. And again, this is going to be, we're going to go ahead and mount that right below here. Okay. That's mounted just like on the schooner model. Now, notice though how long this is. This just feels kind of wrong as far as the look. So that's why I tried to pull it down a bit. Get more of a space in there, because this will be taken up by a sail. We will get to, when we get to the rigging video, sail video, we'll show that part up there. But let's go ahead and glue that in. Again, we'll have a slight angle to it. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing with the bottom. I have that. There we go. Okay. Now, one thing you can do on this, if you're going to move, have this angled one side or the other, you can actually shave the corners of this small square section off to give you room to turn that gaff boom, lower gaff boom, enough. And again, I want to have it facing slightly to the starboard. So there we go. There we go. Okay. And now we've got our fore and aft rigged mast. Probably want to move this a little more. There we go. Now we'll just let those sit. I want that glue, the tester's glue, to firm, completely dry and weld pieces. And then we're going to go back and we're going to fill with a gap filling super glue. I prefer using the super glue because it actually adds some strength to the joint instead of just using modeling putty. So we'll be right back with that. All right, now that we've got kind of dry, it didn't take but a couple minutes, if that. What we're going to do is we're going to take some of the super glue and we're going to put it on a knife, because we need to apply it to that empty space, the inside, both on top and bottom, and even back here, to give it some rigidity and some strength, especially when we're trying to rig our vessel and glue the sails onto it. Okay, a little drop of glue, and then just spatula it in. That really very quickly it will firm up that joint. There we go. You don't need to do this on the bottom boom, but it doesn't really hurt, because that has there's a square section on that where this boom joins, that gives it plenty of surface area to bond to. There we go. It's a little much. Okay, but there we go. So then to the back. And the bottom looks good. Okay, so we're going to leave that there. And then we're going to set this, we're going to do the same with this one. Okay, that's the most important step, is getting that bottom section filled. That puts the most super glue in the joint. Okay, alrighty. And then on the back slightly. A little too much. Okay, there we go. That's done. Okay, so now we'll just let those sit aside and dry. Alright, here's the first mast, and this is the regular Brigantine mast. You'll see the much taller 4.5 sail I'll be able to put back there, and you compare it to the original Brig model. Quite a difference, and it looks kind of sharp, just with that simple conversion. Even with the exaggerated, the bulkiness of that joint there, it looks pretty good. Okay, so next one, I'll go ahead and since this is not a finished model yet, I'll go ahead and we'll swap the other one in and see how it looks in there. All right, and there is the hermaphrodite or schooner brig version of the mast with no yard arms at all. So that is the quick and easy way to go about doing this conversion of mast. In the next video, we'll actually go over how to scratch build your own mast and see how, if you want to go ahead and try that approach. All right, so hopefully this is a very informative video. Stay tuned for the next in the series, not just the scratch built mast, but also how do you rig and add the sails. All right, catch you guys later. Take care. Bye-bye.